Every year, Metropolitan Community College celebrates Black History Month by bringing thoughtful and motivating speakers and discussion to our campuses. The keynote address to this year's event was presented by Dr. Paulette Walker, well-known visionary and dedicated leader, and the 25th president of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Her topic, African Americans as Agents for Social Change. I'm Kent Pavelka, your host, and Dr. Walker joins us next on MCCTV. I want to welcome to Omaha, Dr. Paulette Walker.
Thank you.
Great to have you in our fair city and at MCC. I'm looking forward to the chat. I thought maybe we would just begin with a little background about yourself. I know you're a Detroit native.
Yes, yes.
And I know eventually PhD at the University of Michigan, right?
Right.
Right.
I was born and raised in Detroit and lived in Detroit until 1990. In 1990, my husband and I moved to the Tampa Bay area. I earned my bachelor's from Michigan State, so I'm a Spartan. I put that in there all the time. But I earned
and a Wolverine.
Yes, I'm both. That I earned my master's and my doctorate from the University of Michigan.
Yeah. And but you grew up in Detroit.
Grew up in Detroit, went to public schools there, and like I said, went to Michigan State and worked in Highland Park, Michigan. As an educator, and Highland Park is a small suburb right outside of the Detroit area. And I was there in Highland Park about 20 years. I started out as a classroom teacher, and when I left as a district-wide supervisor for state and federal projects.
Very well.
Yeah.
What grades did you teach when you
I
taught?
taught for 4 years, and I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math and science. Yeah.
It's got to be a wonderful person who can teach that age group.
Oh, I love
that's a tough age group.
That's my favorite group because they're just as crazy as they want to be, and that's good because sometimes I think I'm crazy too. So it works out fine. But no, I love that group. I really do.
So, are you more a Wolverine or a Spartan? I'm just curious.
I'm Spartan.
Spartan all the way.
I'm Spartan. Yes.
Well, they're pretty good in basketball
I
this
know.
year.
I know.
You spent how long at the University of South Florida?
I was there 21 years. I retired in 2011. And again, when we moved, my husband was a little bit older than me, well, really a lot older than me, and he retired, and that's why we moved to Florida. And so when we moved, I said, well, I guess we all retired then. And so when I went, we did a lot of traveling, and then he was diagnosed with cancer, and he made the decision. He said, you might want to start thinking about working full-time just to keep you occupied. And I said, well, we'll see. So I started out, like I said, part-time, 20 hours a week. Next thing I know, the time was going by. Here I was full-time. And when I left there, I left as director of undergraduate programs in the College of Education. I should say undergraduate programs. And I was entirely in charge of the internship program.
So, University of South Florida in Tampa?
It's in Tampa,
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And is that a large?
It's a large
student
institution,
body?
right?
Mm-hmm.
They have. I'm not sure if we're number 2 or number 3 now in terms of student population, but at the time I was there, they averaged anywhere between 42 to 46,000 students.
Wow!
So it was large. And the College of Education, where I worked, was the 9th largest college of education in the country. So
What was the focus of that title, of that job that you had?
Well, at the time, what we did then was I made sure that all of our undergraduate programs in the College of Ed were accredited, that they met the state regulations, the federal regulations. I met with faculty and staff on a regular basis to make sure that our curriculum was in fact adhering to what those guidelines were. And in terms of the internship, my area of responsibility again was to make sure that all of our students received an internship and that they received an internship in rural, urban, and suburban areas. So they did like a rotation, even though they may have been a secondary ed student, because usually elementary students would do a rotated kind of internship. But we made sure that our secondary students did the same thing, again, not knowing where they're going to end up.
So these were future teachers.
Oh, yeah, future teachers. All future teachers.
Yeah.
Yes.
In all grades? I mean, the
Right,
education.
right.
Okay. So tell us about your presentation here at MCC, historical or African Americans as agents of social change. There's a subheading too. But,
Yes. Yes.
What Give us the little 10-minute
Well,
version
okay,
of your
just
presentation.
I'm not gonna tell you everything now, okay? But I'll tell you just enough to kind of pique the, as they say, just pique the intuition there going
Okay.
on. But basically, what I'm saying is that when we look at cities throughout these, United States, oftentimes we don't see African Americans as play major roles in the structure and the foundation of that city. If you don't see them as structure or part of the foundation, then you definitely don't see them as a change agent. And so even when I was asked to come here and I was looking to see, what was going on in Omaha in terms of the historical perspective, to know that how long African Americans have been in just Omaha and in the state of Nebraska, and who was the first black person that lived here, who was the first architect that built the first home, all of that was very historical. And to me, it's getting that message out, so that everybody understands that when you tell history, you cannot tell history in segregated pieces. The history of these United States is an integrated piece of everybody's history, and sometimes that's forgotten. And so to me, that's how you become a change agent, and that's how African Americans have been change agents in the country, in the world, and particularly in Omaha, Nebraska.
Well, to what extent would you say that all of that is missing in history? Not necessarily just relating to Omaha, but in general.
No, I think that it's in some school districts they don't even have it. They've totally removed it, and it kind of depends on where you are and who's the supervisor or who's the superintendent of schools as to, or who even the legislators are, as far as what they deem important and what they don't. And what I've been doing is looking at, as I want to call it, looking at curriculum as it relates to African American history throughout the 50 states, and seeing which states have infused it, have integrated it, and which states have still think about the fact that African American history is a separate entity
Right.
from U.S. history when it's not.
Right. So are we making progress in integrating the two histories in general, or you say it depends on the
It does.
area?
It just depends on the area.
Is it
It's
geographical?
just geographical. It is really geographical, and you'll find some communities that, in spite of what has been mandated curriculum, you'll have educators who will infuse it anyway and put it there. So they're going over and beyond what is expected. But sometimes they're criticized for not adhering to the established curriculum.
Yeah.
Because they're not. They really aren't. But there's a reason for why they're not doing that. So to me, it is truly bridging that gap between what is, what should be, and what could be.
I imagine there are folks who'd want to know, well, why is it important to look at history as a conglomerate or an aggregate rather than the two,
Okay.
white history
Right,
and black
right
history, really?
history.
Because
Well,
there are departments, black history departments.
Oh, yes.
Is that an issue? Is that a problem?
Let's say it can be. Now, to me, I don't see how you have history of let's just say a state, any state. I don't see how you have history of that state and you not include all of the populations that added to that history. So if you're going to look at the total continuum of from beginning to end of that particular state, you have to do that. Now, I think where you find institutions of higher ed that have colleges or departments or schools of African American history or African history, they've done that because what they have found in those states particularly, that there was this lapse, that students were not being taught. And if they were, it was only the black students that were being taught that, as opposed to everybody understanding that all of us have come together to create this fabric or this quilt of who we are.
Where do you think we stand in the attempt to do all that? I mean, are we just beginning, or have we made?
No, I think we've made some progress. I do. I think we've made some, but unfortunately, due to the current times of what we're in, it seems to be more of where we are pulling ourselves apart from each other, as opposed to pulling ourselves back together. And this country was founded on us coming together, and unfortunately, that's not quite where we are. And I hate to say it because I'm trying not to be political here at all.
Right.
But that's where we are. And so to me it says all of us have to do a better job. And it's not just incumbent upon one political party or another. It's not incumbent upon one citizenry or group of citizens and another. It's incumbent upon all of us to understand that our country really is a melting pot as opposed to a salad. And when I say that, when you're a salad, you know a carrot from a cucumber.
And a tomato.
And a tomato. But if you're all infusing that together, it doesn't matter. We all, when I say look alike, not that we ever will all look alike by any means, but if I'm going to focus more on who's the carrot and who's the tomato and who's the cucumber as opposed to it's a good salad and it tastes good.
Yeah. But maybe we need the right salad dressing.
Yes.
That's what brings it all together.
It is.
And to go along with the analogy,
yeah.
that's what you're talking about doing.
Right.
So I don't want you to say anything you don't want to say, but I mean, where in this country are we doing a better job than others in this effort?
I think that what I'm finding is that the smaller areas tend to do a better job. I think there once was a time when large urban areas were doing extremely well. Like I said, I come from the Detroit area, I live in the Tampa Bay area, and there was a time when you could see all this progress being made. Now it seems as if that progress has been kind of tossed aside, and what is happening is that we are fighting among ourselves and between ourselves and pulling each other apart rather than focusing on, look how much progress we've made. And if you've made this much in this short period of time, because, in retrospect, our country is relatively young.
Sure.
It
is.
It's younger than the trees are that we have here.
True enough.
And so, but we focus on, look at what we've done in the last 5 years. Well, what's 5 years? And when you consider how long we've been, or the fact that, we're still arguing, or maybe not arguing, that's probably not the word, we're still having discussions over some of the same topics we had when I was at a university as a student in the 60s.
No kidding.
And it's like, I thought we already had this discussion once. Why are we discussing it again? So, and to me, I think it's fine that we can have philosophical differences. That's how we all grow. But if you shut down or I shut down and we don't talk at all, then it's like we're never going to get anywhere.
Relative to curriculum, what's the impediment? Is it what you're talking about, this adversarial climate that we're in, or is it economics, or what?
I think it's more of the adversarial climate that we're in, because money is not going to be just the answer. It can help, don't get me wrong. But if people don't have a desire and a passion to want to make that change, you can throw all the money you can into the pot, and it's not going to change me. But if I come to the table and say, I'm ready to discuss this, even though I know that you and I may disagree, and that's fine, but how do I even know what I'm disagreeing with if I don't even know what you're thinking? So to me, it's like, it does take the conversations. It does take the discussions. And sometimes they might even be heated conversations. And that's okay, as long as the heat doesn't get too hot, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you attempt to share with your audiences examples of?
Yes, I do.
Share some of that with us.
It's like, okay, let me give you an example right now, which is one that has just, it's just eating at me. We've had conversations about the Star-Spangled Banner everybody knows that. But we only sing the first 2 verses. There's a third verse to that Star-Spangled Banner.
You don't know it, do you?
I don't know all of the words, but I do know that that third verse focuses on the death of slaves.
It does.
Yes, and that Francis Scott Key was not this great humanitarian that we've been taught that he was. But that's controversial.
The death of slaves.
The death of slaves. And then when I say that, because
not the death of slavery, but
the
death of slaves.
Of slaves, and that they should be killed. It's a tribute to them being murdered. It really is. But we don't ever sing that part of it. And so, but I think that if people knew that, they would understand why there's sometimes the controversy that we have. Doesn't mean that you don't sing, doesn't mean you don't stand, doesn't mean you don't kneel, all that is just, I won't say it's trivial, but the issue is, do you know the Star-Spangled Banner? And most of us don't know it.
It's really a great example. I had no clue. I imagine a number of our viewers are Googling right
Yes,
now.
they probably are, and I want them to. I
Yeah.
want them to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, fact checking is good. That's what we do. You know, just because somebody says something doesn't make it true. We do need to find out, is what they're saying the truth, and if it isn't, then we need to correct the truth. Because they say the truth will set you free.
So that's a great example. Any others come to mind?
I think the other one for me would be, and we don't, again, it's conversations that we don't want to talk about. When we look at the historical perspectives of various cities, we tend to look at what were the assets, what were the things that positively came out, as opposed to what were some of the challenges that community had to overcome. We have places in Florida where cities were burned down, literally burned down, because they were black owned and black operated. And I know here in this, well, I won't say in this area, I believe it was in Oklahoma, is where they had the community, and something similar happened. And to not talk about it, I think is a greater sin than to talk about it and say, oh, well, it happened, okay, we should get over it. Some things you don't ever get over. And, you know, the old phrase about I can forgive, but I won't forget. Just because I don't talk about it doesn't mean it doesn't still hurt.
Were those examples pre-Jim Crow or post-Jim Crow?
No, it would probably be pre and post.
Yeah.
Because the two that I'm thinking about in Florida were in like the 50s and the 60s. Mm-hmm. And then the one in Oklahoma was probably, and I'm trying to say, because I remember going to the area, and they have the town now has memorialized this area, and I can't remember, I don't want to give the wrong dates on that one. Yeah.
But closer to Jim Crow.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Do you had a subheading in your presentation, historical landscapes, and then a second one, considering contemporary strategies. Mm-hmm. Now, we talked a little bit about historical landscapes just now.
Right. And so what are some of the strategies?
Yeah.
Just like today, kid, like we're having this conversation, that's, to me, one of the most important strategies that we can have, because we then begin to educate each other. I think another strategy is for all of us to just do our homework. You know, I can remember as a little girl, you know how your parents would always say, now go sit at the dining room table, do your homework, do this. You know, in those days we had encyclopedias. Well, we don't use encyclopedias anymore, and good so, because you think about it, encyclopedia was already outdated by the time we received it anyway.
Yeah.
But we thought it
Remember
was the
they
best thing.
used to sell you supplements.
Yeah, I think I had every kind of encyclopedia there was, you know. But you did your homework. You were taught how to do research. Even though it might have been a little outdated, you were taught how to look up a particular topic, delve into it, ask questions about it, and you know, your grandmother or somebody indirectly might even ask you something about it. You know, I can remember, I did not know my great-grandmother. She was deceased before I was born. But they always tell the story to me that I remind the family of her. And I say, well, why? They say, because you always ask the question that no one else has ever asked. And they say about the time that you know, she was born into slavery and became free. And she had a little piece of land in her property, and she was sweeping her front yard. Now, the front yard was dirt. I mean, there was no grass there or anything. And this gentleman came by who said to her, why are you sweeping that when you got these two children here you can do this? She said, I'm sweeping so they don't have to sweep. And so for me, I'm third generation college, and that's unusual in black society, that I would have a grandmother, you know, mother or father, and grandparents who had all gone to college and had all graduated. That's unusual, but it shouldn't be unusual. You know, to me, that should be the norm. And here we now have, in all communities, we have people who will say, I'm the first to do something. In 2019, you should not be the first doing anything unless it's the first person to, you know, to discover another planet or something like that.
You're right.
But the things that we're talking about are first. I'm like, that makes no sense to me.
You alluded to the fact that you did a little history searching relative to Omaha, correct?
Yes.
What'd you find out?
Now if I tell you everything, it's like, well, why are people going to come hear me? But there was, what I found out was in terms of who was the first black person that was born in the state of Nebraska and in the city of Omaha. I found out about, like I said, the architect, the one who designed this house, the first black church that was here. It was amazing to me, and again, because mainstream population, when you think of Omaha, you don't think of black people. You just it's like, why are you going to Omaha? What are you going to do there? And then when you read the history and say, this is a secret that shouldn't be a secret. Everybody should understand that there was an Omaha, there was a Detroit, all at the same time, doing the same things, but why is it that Omaha doesn't get the same kind of publication, put it that way, as a Detroit would get? Detroit outgrew Omaha. But and when I say outgrew it, in terms of citizens, not in terms of cultural or any other kind of perspective. So when we start talking about strategies, that to me again is to, instead of looking at our differences, let's look at all the things that we have in common. And why was it that these two cities who were coming about the same time, why is it that one went one way and one went the other?
You speaking of the two cities in Omaha?
No, I'm talking about like a Detroit and an
Omaha.
And saying that in terms of the historical perspective.
So Omaha went in a different direction than Detroit? In what way?
Well, when I say they went in a different direction, the growth was slower.
Right.
Yeah, and that may have been because, in Detroit you had the auto industry. I'm not sure what happened there because, unfortunately, I'm a math person. I'm not a historian, so I don't know what happened. But when you look at that, it made me think, okay, why did this happen? Mm-hmm. And to me, that becomes the research project and something that we could all find out, talk about, have a discussion about it, and say, okay, I think I see what happened here. Let's delve into this more. So in terms of strategies, those are doable, feasible, practical things that all of us can do. And we can even teach our children, We can teach them how to find out more about their own city and the history of that city and of all cultures, not just black culture or white culture, all cultures, and just see, how did the city become, who and what it is today.
How much is on the public education to get this done?
Public education to me starts at home. So, and I say that to say, if I'm doing it at home, and I may not be doing it at the same level, then the expectation is that they're going to do it at school. Mm-hmm. If the expectation is that the only way they're going to learn it is at school, you've already failed. Because schools can only do so much. But again, I go back to that continuum. Again, we talk about strategies. That to me is a strategy that can work. Even though I know that we say, well, we have parents who don't come to PTA meetings. Well, they're working, so maybe they can't. But you can still communicate with them. I don't know a parent that will say to anybody, I want my child to be a failure. I don't know a parent that says that. Now they may not all have the same parenting strategies that we would like for them to have. They may not be able to come to a PTA meeting or to an open house or whatever you're having at school, but that doesn't mean that the school still cannot provide information to that parent, and you can watch the child. You can see what's happening. If the parent is actively involved, you're going to see that in that child. If the parent is one who's saying, hey, look, I'm out of here, I'm not doing this. And what I found with the work that I did with parents is that those who were not actively involved had bad and negative experiences themselves in school. So why would I go back?
Yeah, it perpetuates
Mm-hmm.
the same.
Yes.
The same history. Tell us about Delta Sigma Theta.
Oh, my love.
You were the 25th president.
I was the 25th national president. I was elected to the presidency during our centennial. Our organization this year is 106 years old. We were founded on January 13th, 1913. And so in 2013 is the year I was elected. And
25th president on the 100th year.
25th president on the 100th year. So I just had it was just a good year, just a good year. So our organization is we're a public service organization. And that means we give back to communities. It doesn't matter where you live. We give back to communities. We are social action oriented. So we are heavily involved in what's going on, not just in the political arena, because sometimes I think when we think about social action, you think only of what's happening politically. for us, social action is action. It's the politics, it's the education, it's the health, it's all of that. But we do look at what's legislated. We have what we call Delta Days in the nation's capital, and we celebrated our 29th year of that in 2018. And we do that every year where, thousands of Deltas will gather in Washington, D.C., and we have workshops and we meet with the legislators there. And it's a good, when I say a good time, not in terms of partying, but it's a good time where there's a lot of dialogue going on. Now, in the state of Florida, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. And so again, in Florida, unfortunately, we've got some issues we need to deal with. So we'll be focusing on that. And I know here, in your area, you too have what we call Delta Days. Now, it may not be as long, and it doesn't matter that it's 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days. What matters is what do you do with the time that you're there, and what's the expectation, and then how do you follow up afterwards.
So it's a sorority of women of color.
Women of color.
But is it only for college? Women
no,
or
because
anybody in the community? Or?
Okay, I joined, when I say I joined, I became a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated in October of 1966 at Michigan State. Mm-hmm. And so will be 53 years. So I've been a member all that period of time. Now we have those who join the organization while they're in college. Then we have those who join when they become what we call an alumni member, meaning they've already graduated. And that's for a variety of reasons as to why a person may not join, while she is in college. It is primarily black women, but we have probably every nationality you could think of that are members of our organization. We have
Is a college degree a requirement?
A college degree, you have to have graduated from college in order to have completed to be in our program. Now, I will say there are there exceptions? There are some exceptions, but the exception is that you have been out of school for at least 10 years, but during that 10-year period of time, you were doing other kinds of things that would lead to being a good citizen.
Credit for life kinds of things.
Yes.
Yeah. So you do the Delta Days. Does it vary community from community?
It does. I mean, I think for all practical purposes, everybody does some kind of Delta Day. They may go to the school board. They might go to their city council meeting, their commission. They do something. Now, there are those areas that go to their state capital as well as, whatever they may do in their own little private communities.
But beyond those days together, or whatever that is in a given community, are you doing things all year long?
Oh yeah,
right?
It's all year. It's just that probably, let me say, for lack of a better term, that may be like the culminating activity, or it might be considered the impetus for why you're going to do something else the rest of the year. So it's not that we do social action only on those days. No, we do social action and we give back 24/7.
You want more members? I mean, we're here to promote if you do.
No, let me put it like this. We need to make sure that the ones that we have are, in fact, adhering to the guidelines and the premises and the ideas of our founders. So I'm not saying that we don't need more members, but more does not always mean that
good
you
members.
get that right.
So again, maybe Google Delta Sigma Theta.
Yes.
And do you know about the local in our area, whether it's a healthy group?
Chapter. It's a healthy chapter. It's a good chapter. And I'm not saying that just because I'm here. I'm saying it because I've been here as a national officer. And this chapter has, as far as I can tell, has always adhered to what it needs to do. It meets the guidelines. It looks at the issues in the community. It addresses them. And those who are in leadership positions, they have questions. They don't just act and they don't just react. They make sure that they are following and adhering to the guidelines of the organization.
One thing I saw that you said is, yes, people of African American diaspora are to be counted while being held accountable.
Yes.
So what's your point of putting those two things together, the to be counted and then on the other hand be accountable?
In order to be, how can I say this? In order to be considered a valued asset to a community, you have to be considered a part of that community. In order to be a part of that community, somebody has to count you. That's the counted part. Now, but in order to be counted, you also have to be accountable and hold up your end of the bargain. So it's a two-way street. You can't have one without the other. In other words, I can't hold you accountable for your action if I don't even count you in what's going on in the community, and vice versa. How do I count you in the community if you're not personally being accountable? So to me, the two go together.
So the first thing is to stand up and say, I'm here.
Yes.
And then the second
And then
part.
The second part is, after you stand up and say, I'm here, then what are you doing? You know, why do you think we should even count you? What is it that you've done? And sometimes, I will admit, sometimes that's not easy. It's not easy to stand up when you've been knocked down all the time. Or as they say,
When you don't feel like you can stand up, right?
Right. And there are communities where people of color don't feel like, they don't feel like they belong, and they don't feel like they can stand up. And so part of what I hope to do with what I'm saying tomorrow is to give them that and I don't want to say hope, because
encouragement?
Yeah, maybe, I like that word. We can use encouragement. That you have the right to stand up because you have helped build this country. You know, maybe not you personally, but your ancestors did. You know, all of us here were brought here by either choice or, you know, or force. There's only one group that were here way before any of us, and unfortunately, they too have been disenfranchised, and that's another whole issue, and we won't even go into that
Another
one
show.
today. Another show. That's another show.
So people need to be encouraged.
Yes.
And so you're motivating folks to stand up.
I'm doing my best to motivate and
counted.
to inspire and to say, you know, you can either be a chicken or you can be an eagle. I'd rather be an eagle and fly.
So you find people that are affected positively by disencouragement. Now, what do you tell them to do in terms of trying to be accountable?
Okay, in terms again of talking about the strategies, you know, I will say to them, okay, why should we count you? What is it that you've done, or what is it that you want to do? What is it that you think that you've been not encouraged to do? And sometimes you can do that one-on-one, sometimes it's in a small group, sometimes it's in a large group. But once you do that, then we're able to start and look at and develop strategies for what they can do. You know, it only takes one. If one person does it, the others will follow. You know, I don't want to refer to the Bible because, again, this is not a seminary church. But I mean, but in the Bible they talk about one. You know, you look at the 10 lepers. There were 10 of them. Only one went back and said thank you. When we talk about being in the boat with Jesus, only one stepped out on faith. So all it takes is one. So my question to everybody is, and I say this purposely, I know that it is not grammatically correct, but I'll ask in a minute, is you the one? You know? And if you is not, then why is you here?
Well, is you getting results?
Yes, I is.
Seriously, I doubt you would be doing what you're doing and be as enthusiastic about it unless you're seeing some positive feedback, right?
I am. I hear it, I see it, I feel it. One of the things that I think all of us have to do is recognize what's our own purpose on earth. And for years, I kept thinking, you know, I saw things happening, and I kept saying, but I'm not benefiting. I mean, I thought I had to benefit. Then, for whatever reason, I realized my purpose is to be a catalyst for change. That's all I do. And if it benefits me, so be it. But if it doesn't, so be it. But as long as the change has taken place, and what I will do is, like, even though I'm speaking here, I'm going to check back and find out, okay, what y'all doing? What's happening now? Mm-hmm. Where are we now? Because if I come in, speak, and leave, and everything stays the same, I could have stayed in Florida. I didn't need to come here to do that. But if I see some change, and like I said, it's only one person, that's fine.
Sometimes you can feel that you've made a change too.
Yeah.
And I think with a little maturity, and once you get to a certain point in life, you realize that it's not about what am I going to get, but what am I going to leave behind?
Right. What's your legacy?
Yeah.
You know, what's your memory? I tell, you know, I'm a grandmother, and I tell people all the time, you know, every time I'm with my grandchildren, I'm having a good time, but I'm creating a memory. because I want them to remember who I
You
was.
bet.
And so to me, I tell people that all the time. What memory are you creating? That becomes your legacy. If your memory of you is everything is bad and negative, then something was wrong. But if you can say she did this, she did that, whatever it may be, and for me, it's that if I can create a change in your thought process, even to the point where you begin to question yourself, then I've accomplished my goal.
You betcha. So do you, when you get feedback from your audiences, do you encourage them to take any first steps if they don't know where to start?
Yes, I will. And sometimes it's I may refer them to a professional group. Sometimes it may be what it is they want to do. I say, you can do that. You can go to your own school board meeting. And I'm not saying that you go and you raise havoc. No, you go and you listen to see what's going on, because it's surprising to me how things happen in communities, and we find ourselves reacting when it's like, why are we reacting? We should have known this. And the best way to learn something is sometimes just to sit and listen, be like a sponge. I can remember when I was working in public schools, one of the principals once told me, uh-oh, here she comes. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, you're like a sponge. I said, why? He said, you sit there and you soak up all this information, and then you'll raise your hand and you'll say, I just want to ask one question. And he said, and that one question changes the whole meeting around. I said, okay, so it's positive being a sponge. He said, in your case, yes, it is. You're not soaking up dirt. I said, okay, good.
So what's your sense of it? I mean, we talk about disenfranchisement, and this is Black History Month we're talking about, African Americans, but I mean, it transcends color lines, disenfranchisement. I mean, are you encouraged with what you see around in our country?
No, I'm really not. I'm going to be honest. And let me tell you why I'm not. I tell people all the time, I'm black all year. I'm not black just in February. So to me, it's like, okay, you give me Black History Month, which is fine. It's the shortest month of the year. But what am I doing the other 11 months of the year? If I'm only celebrating this and bringing it to attention just in February, then I've not done what I needed to do. To me, and I find little people who have no idea who Martin Luther King Jr. was. I'm like, how did you not know who he was? Well, we just get the day off. They don't know that. And I'm thinking, we've done a poor job of helping them to understand who our quote-unquote heroes and sheroes are. And I'm not talking about just in terms of the black community.
No.
I'm talking across the board.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you see on television all the time these so-called comedy bits, the man on the street, you know, and then, you know who the president, people don't even know.
They don't know.
The vice president, anybody, and make up a name, and what do you think of him as vice president? You know what I mean? It's not even him. So, yeah. But, gosh, that's kind of a bleak reality if that's the direction everybody's headed. Well, not everybody, but...
Okay, let's put it like this. Is it bleak or is it realistic? Now, if it's realistic, then you can change that gray sky into a blue sky. But if it's bleak, you're only going to see gray. For me, it's like, okay, here's the reality.
You see enough sun peeking through to keep you going,
just
right?
Say, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And that's what I do.
Your book, you co-authored a book called We Can Have Better Urban Schools. Yes. Bottom line points in that book?
Well, basically what we were talking about is how is it or why is it that when we look at particularly urban schools, because when we think of urban, we tend to think of schools that are just disheveled, everything bad that's possible. No, according to the census, anything more than 50,000 people is considered an urban community. Mm-hmm. So when you say it that way, then people then get a whole different perspective of what a school should look like, what should be going on in that school. The expectation is that people of color and poor people should not have what other people have. And I'm like, no. That's not what our public school system was built around. That's not the purpose of it. So when I say we can have better urban schools, I'm looking at schools in general and saying what is it that we can do or we need to do in that school system to make sure that our students, when they leave that district, when they leave there, that they're leaving with a sense of self-worth. Because to me, self-worth is more important. I can know all the math in the world, but if I don't feel that I'm worthy, it doesn't matter.
So what's the answer to your rhetorical question? What can we do to, I mean, a lot of it has to do with finances.
Oh yeah, it does. And again, I go back to money is not going to cure everything, but it's the belief that you can do better. When I worked in, as I said, the school district was Highland Park. When I started out in Highland Park, it was the epitome of all school districts. When I left the school district, the demographics had changed, and so the school district was not of the same quality, let me put it that way, as it had been before. But the one thing I found is that in spite of the fact that the people there were making less than anybody had ever made before, we had millage votes in those days.
Had what?
Millage votes where a certain percentage of your tax money went to public schools. They never failed to pass a millage vote, never, because they valued education. And so to me, it was like we have to keep out in front the value of education and how that, for many of us, education was the key to getting us to the next step and getting us to a better step. And for some families, they've given up on that because the schools have given up on them. And I would say to, you know, when I was working with undergraduates, and even when I was teaching, I taught graduate students. And so I would teach people who were becoming principals and superintendents. Mm-hmm. So I did the whole gamut. I would always say to them, there's no such thing as an at-risk child. The only risk that child has is whose classroom they get in. That's the risk. It's not the child. So if you look at a child as being at promise, your outlook and your perspective is a whole different viewpoint. And so that's what, for me, when I say we can have better urban schools, we can. If we start looking at those children as being, those are the kids of the future, those are the ones who are at promise. They're not at risk.
You're just a half glass whole lady.
Thank you.
Because you, again, but at the same time, I'm
a force to reckon with, yes.
Well, no. If you judge what the progress we're making here, how are we doing in that attempt to have that?
Are we doing as well as we could or should? No, because I think that for whatever reason, and I'm not real sure why, I think a variety of reasons, people have given up on their own communities, and they've given up on even themselves. And so we start thinking and believing this is the best we're going to be. And I'm like, no. If you're already at the best and you're 5, well, what are you going to do the next 60, 70 years of your life? You're not at the best. And I mean, here I am, 70 plus. I know I look good for my age. That's another whole story. But anyway, but here I am, and I'm not at my best. I'm still growing. And every day I hope to grow more and more, and I hope to get others to understand that they too are growing, and that it's that growth together that's going to help us to overcome where we are right now. And I think as a country, we're at a place where all of us are like just frustrated, you know? You're just frustrated because we don't know what to do. And sometimes when you have to take that frustration and turn it inward and say, enough is enough.
Turn off the news.
Yes. And I'm a news junkie, but I
am too.
But I would be the first one to tell you.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing.
It is. You know, and the more you hear, it's like, oh no, not again. Yeah. Remove yourself from that and say, what are you going to do? And I go back to, is you the one?
Yep. It'd be a great place to stop, except I want to ask you, your motto I read is, no one can make you feel inferior.
Without your consent.
Yeah.
That's right. I give nobody authority on defining who I am. Because if I do that, then I have given you more power than I have to myself. I really believe in empowering others. And so to me, if you define who I am, or if you say I'm not worthy, and I start buying that and believing it, you have overcome, and I am now not worthy. So I don't give you consent to do that.
Place to catch that initially is at home, right?
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Got about a minute left. I'd just like to give you the floor. Anything you'd like to add to what we've said?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you so much for even having me here in Omaha, having me here at Metropolitan Community College, and having this time to just sit and talk and chat about issues that are important to all of us. I think the more we have those kinds of conversations, the better off we'll be as a country. and definitely as as our own little private communities, because we get in our little communities and we close our little doors and everything is fine, but it's not fine. The house is falling down, the house is burning up, and we're sitting there talking about, yep, everything's fine. No, it's not. So to me, it's like, I just say thank you. I just thank you for the opportunity. And I hope that those who can come and see the program will enjoy it. Now, I will say, there's probably going to be some things that will be said that they might not feel comfortable with, but that's my purpose.
You bet.
If you're comfortable, then I didn't do my job.
Dr. Paulette Walker, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us for MCCTV. Our goal is to better acquaint you with the mission, the leadership, and the reach of the college. I'm Kent Pavelka for Metropolitan Community College.